The morning sun painted the sea in a soft sky blue color, calm and innocent, as if the world itself didn't know what was about to happen. Margaret Blackwood sat quietly in her wheelchair near the balcony doors of her luxurious seaside villa. The salty breeze brushed her silver hair, and for a moment, she closed her eyes and smiled. Life had not been kind to her body, but it had been kind to her heart. At her feet lay Max, her golden retriever, old now, his fur slightly graying around the ears, but his eyes still full of devotion. Every few seconds, he lifted his head to look at her, as if silently asking, "Are you okay, Mom?" Margaret leaned forward with effort and gently stroked his head. "You're a good boy, Max," she whispered. Max thumped his tail against the marble floor. Inside the villa, expensive furniture reflected wealth, crystal chandeliers, imported rugs, and walls lined with art. Yet none of it mattered to Margaret. Her eyes drifted toward a framed photo on the table. A young boy stood beside her in the picture, smiling proudly as she held a school certificate. That boy was her son, Ethan Blackwood. A son raised with sacrifice. Margaret had been a schoolteacher, not rich, not powerful, but respected. When Ethan was only 7, his father died in a factory accident. From that day on, Margaret became mother and father both. She worked longer hours. She skipped meals. She wore the same coat for 10 winters. Also, Ethan could have a future. "Education is your real inheritance," she would tell him as she packed his lunch. Ethan was brilliant, sharp-minded, ambitious, and charming. Teachers praised him. Neighbors admired him. Margaret believed her sacrifices were worth it. Years later, Ethan earned a scholarship to a prestigious university. Margaret sold her wedding ring to pay for his living expenses. When Ethan graduated and entered the world of finance, money finally came fast and heavy. Luxury replaced struggle. But with wealth came something else. Distance. The stroke that changed everything. Margaret's stroke happened on an ordinary afternoon. She had been watering the garden when the world suddenly spun, and her body collapsed onto the grass. When she woke up in the hospital, she couldn't feel her legs. Doctors spoke gently, but the truth was brutal. She may never walk again. Ethan stood beside the bed, silent. Margaret looked at him, fear in her eyes. "I'm sorry," she whispered. "I didn't mean to become a burden." Ethan forced a smile. "You're not a burden, Mom." But something in his eyes had changed. Love. Turning into resentment. At first, Ethan did everything right. He moved Margaret into a luxury villa by the sea. He hired nurses. He bought her the best wheelchair money could buy. People admired him. "What a devoted son," they said. But devotion is heavy when it interrupts ambition. Meetings were missed. Dates were cancelled. Vacations were postponed. Margaret noticed. "You should live your life," she told him one evening. "Don't worry about me." Ethan nodded, but inside him, frustration grew. He began to see his mother not as the woman who raised him, but as a chain holding him back. The insurance documents arrived quietly one day. A nurse placed them on Ethan's desk. Margaret's life insurance. Inheritance papers. Assets worth millions. Ethan stared at the numbers. And a thought dark and terrifying entered his mind. How long will she live like this? The only one who never changed. While humans shifted, Max never did. He followed Margaret everywhere. When nurses came, Max watched closely. When Ethan raised his voice, Max growled softly. When Margaret cried at night, Max slept beside her wheelchair. Animals sense truth. And Max sensed danger. "Let's go for a drive." One morning, Ethan appeared unusually cheerful. "Mom," he said, kneeling beside her wheelchair, "how would you like a drive today?" Margaret's eyes lit up. "To the sea?" Ethan smiled. "There's a cliff nearby. Beautiful view. Fresh air." Max stood up immediately, ears alert. Margaret hesitated. "But, is it safe?" Of course, Ethan replied smoothly. I'll be with you. She trusted him. She always had. The road to silence. The drive was quiet. The road curved along the coastline, sunlight sparkling on sky-blue water below. Margaret breathed deeply. This is beautiful, she said. Max sat in the back seat, restless. As they reached the cliffside clearing, Ethan stopped the car. No guardrails, Margaret noticed softly. It's peaceful, Ethan replied. He unloaded the wheelchair. The wind picked up. Max began to whimper. At the edge. Ethan pushed the wheelchair closer to the edge. Margaret suddenly felt cold. Ethan. Why so close? Ethan's hands trembled. Max barked sharply. Enough! Ethan snapped at the dog. Margaret turned her head slowly, trying to see her son's face. What she saw broke her heart. Not anger. Not fear. Emptiness. I loved you, she whispered. The wind swallowed her words. The wind softened after the chaos, as if the cliff itself had exhaled. Margaret Blackwood sat trembling in her wheelchair, her hands still buried deep in Bruno's warm fur. The dog stood firm, legs planted like stone, body angled between her and the man who had once been her whole world. Her son. Ethan Blackwood. He stood a few steps away, chest rising and falling too fast, his expensive shoes dusted with dirt. His eyes darted, not with regret, not with fear, but with calculation. Things had not gone as planned. The fisherman, a middle-aged man with sunburnt skin and rough hands, crouched beside Margaret. Ma'am, are you hurt? He asked gently. Margaret swallowed hard. Her throat burned as if words had to crawl their way out. I'm alive, she whispered. That alone felt like a miracle. Bruno whined softly, licking her trembling fingers. His tail wagged, but cautiously, as if even joy needed permission after what had just happened. A mother's silent realization. Margaret looked up at Ethan again. For years, she had defended him. When nurses complained about his temper, she excused it. When neighbors said he never visited, she justified it. When loneliness crept into her nights, she blamed herself. But now, sitting inches away from death, a truth settled into her heart like cold stone. My son tried to kill me. The realization hurt more than the fall ever could. Ethan, she said softly. He flinched, not from guilt, but annoyance. This is a misunderstanding, he said quickly, forcing calm into his voice. The wheelchair slipped. You know how unstable these cliffs are. The fisherman straightened. I saw his hands, the man said firmly. They were pushing. Ethan's jaw tightened. Bruno growled low, a deep warning sound that vibrated from his chest. The sound said one thing clearly. You are not welcome here. The walk back from the cliff. They didn't call the police immediately. Margaret asked them not to. Please, she said quietly. Just take me home. The fisherman hesitated but nodded. Ethan pushed the wheelchair back toward the car, slower now, careful, not out of love, but fear of witnesses. Bruno walked beside Margaret, never once looking away from Ethan. Not trusting him. Not forgiving him. The sea below shimmered in soft sky-blue tones, peaceful, unaware of how close it had come to swallowing a woman's life. As they drove away, Margaret stared out the window. She remembered teaching Ethan to tie his shoes. Holding his feverish body through sleepless nights. Clapping the loudest at his graduations. And now this. Her heart cracked quietly, completely. The house that felt empty. Back at the seaside villa, nurses rushed forward in panic. What happened? One asked. Nothing, Ethan snapped. She just got tired. Margaret said nothing. She let Bruno guide her inside. That night, she didn't sleep. She lay awake, staring at the ceiling, listening to the rhythmic sound of Bruno's breathing beside her bed. Every time she closed her eyes, she felt the wheelchair tipping again. The air rushing past. Her son's silence. Tears slipped down her temples, soaking into the pillow. She didn't cry loudly. Mothers rarely do. A dog's watchful night. Bruno didn't sleep either. He sat upright near the bed, ears alert, eyes fixed on the door. Every sound made him tense. Footsteps. A door closing. A distant voice. When Ethan passed the room, Bruno growled. Not loud. Just enough. Ethan stopped. The two locked eyes. Man versus animal. Greed versus loyalty. You're just a dog, Ethan muttered. Bruno didn't blink. The doctor's visit. The next morning, a doctor came to check Margaret. Any pain? He asked. My heart, she replied. The doctor smiled gently, misunderstanding. You're strong, he said. You've survived worse. Margaret almost laughed. The doctor left. Ethan stood by the window, scrolling on his phone. Mom, he said casually, we should update your insurance. Just routine stuff. Margaret closed her eyes. There it was. Confirmation. She opened them slowly. Leave, she said. Ethan frowned. What? Leave my room. Something in her tone made him pause. Then he shrugged. Rest, he said, and walked out. Bruno stayed. A mother's decision. That afternoon, Margaret asked for her lawyer. When the man arrived, she spoke calmly, clearly. I want my assets protected, she said. And my son removed from all medical and financial control. The lawyer hesitated. Are you certain? Margaret looked down at Bruno, who rested his head on her knee. Yes. For the first time in years, she chose herself. The son notices change. Ethan noticed. The nurses spoke less. Documents disappeared. Doors closed. Something was shifting, and he didn't like it. That evening, he confronted her. You're turning people against me, he said sharply. Margaret met his gaze. No, she replied softly. You did that yourself. His eyes hardened. This isn't over, he said. Bruno stood. Blocking him. Again. The dog who knew too much. Late that night, Ethan packed a bag. Not to leave. To plan. Bruno watched from the hallway. The dog didn't bark. Didn't move. Just memorized every sound. Every smell. Every intention. Somewhere deep inside his animal heart, Bruno understood something humans often forget. Danger doesn't always roar. Sometimes it smiles.